Just a little bit of a reaction to Eddie Hearn's appearance on the Boxing Asylum podcast. I saw a number of guys on forums saying that he took an absolute battering, he got asked all sorts of awkward questions, that sort of thing. I must admit, I thought he did rather well. He was being interviewed, if you like, by a few quite aggressive, hardcore boxing fans who, made a very, very big deal about being hardcore boxing fans and a big deal about how awful the pay-per-view is, how awful, Hearn's opponents are. Now, let me say, for one, I'd consider myself a hardcore boxing fan. I have been critical about a pay-per-view. I have been critical about Scott Quigg's opponents. I've even been critical to an extent about Anthony Joshua. But some of the comments these guys were making were just absurd. I think at one point they said Michael Sprotts would be Anthony Joshua's first fight. I mean, look at Michael Sprotts' record. Has he ever been used for a first fight? I doubt it. I think what was clear is Eddie Hearn came across like a hardcore boxing fan himself. He made reference to the fact he'd been in gyms since he was 8 or 9. He watches boxing every night, researching fighters, researching opponents. Hearn also made points like, he had to fight with Sky to get Boylan versus Goodjohn on TV. Sky are interested in the big names. And an example he gave was with regard to next Saturday's Dublin card, where he's going to have to put Crawler in a 6-rounder on TV. And I think the guy interviewing him said, that doesn't do anything for me. But let's be honest, Eddie Hearn works for Sky, or with Sky. His job as a promoter and as sort of Sky associate is to get as much money and as much support as possible. He needs people tuning in. And I actually agree with him that more people are likely to tune in to what's a well-known prospect in an uncompetitive 6-rounder, as opposed to a sort of classic trade fight. I mean, let's be honest, the amount of people who want to watch Goodjohn versus Boylan is very limited. Now, I'm certainly one of them. I'd love to see Goodjohn versus Boylan too. I think a lot of the people who watch videos I put online would be on the same side as me. A lot of people on boxing forums, a lot of people who listen to Boxing Asylum. But let's be realistic here. We can be critical of Eddie Hearn to some extent, but you have to cut the guy some slack. I mean, clearly, if we put on a whole evening of 50-50 trade fights, it wouldn't do well with the public. I think Eddie Hearn used the example at one point that he had Lee Purdy versus Colin Lyons on an early Sky card. And, the hardcore boxer fans like, that was a good fight, what's wrong with that? I think we need to get out of this hardcore boxing fan idea that every fight has to be super competitive, because whilst that is ideal, it's just not realistic. I mean, let's be honest, George Groves being on that pay-per-view is going to sell. It's going to drive ticket sales. It's going to drive people buying the pay-per-view. It's going to help with the promotion. It's going to make Sky and Eddie Hearn money. It's good for boxing. Yes, we know it's not going to be a competitive fight. We expect George Groves to win. We know it's not 50-50. In fact, it's probably more like 95-5. You'd have to say it'd probably be about a 1 in 20 chance of Groves losing that fight. But what do you expect Eddie Hearn to do? I think there are some changes that need to be made. I'm not a Sky Eddie Hearn fanboy by any stretch of the imagination. But I didn't really get people chortling on forums and saying how Eddie Hearn got destroyed and, sort of enjoying this line of questioning, because it's just not realistic. Sky is a profitable business that is driven by pay-per-view sales, subscriptions. And if cards were still being headlined by Ricky Boylan and Tyler Goodjohn and Colin Lyons and Lee Purdy, boxing wouldn't be riding the high that it is now. It's only with characters like your Frotches and your Groves and your Hayes that you get boxing to become a crossover sport. So I actually think Eddie Hearn did rather well. And my particular opinion is that the interviewers on Boxing Asylum came across quite poorly at times. I thought they were so determined to be these hardcore fans that they showed little or no, they showed little or no interest in the business side of things. And let's be honest, if Eddie Hearn wasn't a capable businessman who was making capable business deals, there might not be any boxing on Sky right now, so we should be thankful for that. And I didn't like the way they asked him questions like, have you ever seen Christopher Abrass fight before? These sort of things. It's just very, very basic. In my idea, it was an attempt to sort of, be rude and humiliate Eddie Hearn and get people laughing at him. And I've got no problem with being critical of him, but it's got to be reasoned criticism. It's got to be logical criticism. It's got to be well thought out criticism. And saying that we should have, sort of 50-50 trade fights headlining the pay-per-view is just not realistic. It's not business. And if hardcore boxing fans want to go down that route, the sport will cease to exist at the level that it's currently operating at. That's my opinion anyway. I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts on this one. Thanks for watching.